Hello, and welcome to edition number 2 of All for All. Our topic today is going to be the perfect all for all topic, which is artificial intelligence, so called. We'll talk about why that's a misnomer and why it should be uh, given to everybody, controlled by everybody under a kind of democratic socialism, because it is, and I'll explain a little bit more as we go forward, an inherently socialist technology. So let me start out with this. I've got a lot of notes for you, and hopefully I'll be able to get through them. First of all, an anecdote. A couple years ago, maybe more now, 10 years ago, I quoted Friedrich Nietzsche as saying, being human is the art of becoming more completely that which you already are. That was a quote. Being human is the art of becoming more completely that which you already are. My daughter, who studied philosophy, said Nietzsche never said that. And I looked into it. By God, Nietzsche never said it. Somebody must have said it. I looked everywhere for it, online and in libraries. The only person anywhere I could find who used that sentence was me, thinking I was quoting Nietzsche. This brought up a kind of paradox in my mind. Well, I didn't think of it per se. It wasn't my thought. It must have been some amalgamation or mix up of memories of various parts of sentences from various people I had read at various times in my life. It's an interesting quote. Being human is the art of becoming more completely that which you already are, not unrelated to the topic of artificial intelligence, too, for several reasons. One of which is that I can't really claim authorship of that sentence, not only because it doesn't completely reflect my own thinking, but because somehow in the sort of mixed master of the brain, something randomly got generated. Well, multiply that by billions upon billions exponentially, and you have something like artificial intelligence. But before we go any deeper into it, maybe I should explain why I presume to think I'm qualified to talk about it. Among other things, before I returned to my career writing, journalism, and that kind of thing, I worked for a number of years in the corporate world and in the academic world, computer programming, data analysis, that sort of thing. That then got moved up to the executive suite, then left the corporate world and designed or helped design computer systems for countries that needed them, including the formerly communist states of Europe and African countries as well. So I've looked at data for a long time, including back in the 1990s, reviewing quote unquote artificial intelligence applications for medicine, for insurance, and for other applications that could be made commercial. What the state of the art was then is very different than what it is now. Quote unquote artificial intelligence in those days generally focused on what they called expert systems. And the idea was you would find one person who was really good at something, brain surgery or actuarial analysis or whatever it might be, and you follow that person around, try to mimic their thought patterns, get them to tell you how they reached certain conclusions, why they did what they did, and then you program that into some software, and the expert system would in effect be an automated version of that one person that you found. Well, that didn't work out. There were other models before then of artificial intelligence. They didn't work out. There were theoretical models that were very abstract, but nothing really clicked until they came up with the model we're using today, which is, and ChatGPT and all of these programs are like this. It's the so-called large language model, or LLM. So ChatGPT, the Chinese program DeepSeek, every other program out there for artificial intelligence it's like Soylent Green from the movie, from the ending of Soylent Green. Spoiler alert, it's people. The fuel that drives this technology is the data that every single one of us generates each and every day as we go about our daily lives, which are increasingly online. In other words, you could say that today's quote unquote AI programs are the unintended work product of the entire world's population. Billions of people have unknowingly been conscripted into this effort, manipulated by the architects of addiction, architects who want to hypnotize us and hook us into doing certain things online in order to generate the raw data that drives this so-called AI. It's created, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, but it's created a new kind of authorship, a collective authorship rather than individual. So when we talk about AI programs and copyright, it's good to have those conversations, but it's important to know that that conversation even extends far more deeply that philosophically than anyone could imagine. Let's start with this. Let's say, because it is generated by everything we do online, and that includes social media, but it also includes, in many cases, financial programs we might be using. Now that Elon Musk and his team are raiding government coffers, it includes when we file taxes, when we apply for Social Security, or when our data is tracked for Social Security, healthcare databases, and so on. We're constantly feeding this machine. And so in looking for a metaphor to describe it, the best one I can come up with is language. So here's a thought experiment. Imagine that there was a corporation out there that patented an actual language, English, not a computer language, not some sort of something else, not a marketing slogan, but the language itself, words, phrases, sentences, cliches, expressions, and said that from that moment on, anyone that uses written or oral language as a medium of communication will need the permission of that corporation. You can pay a weekly subscription fee, or you can pay it per transaction, but everything you do is controlled by them, and any new word you might make up automatically owned by them. Any new idea you might think up automatically owned by them. That's kind of what has happened with AI. They've been very shrewd about making us think it's some magical technology from above, but all they're doing is mining what you and I do. Now, some people, well-intentioned people, have characterized the internet as a kind of commons, like the publicly shared green spaces that were closed off from English villagers in the 1600s and 1700s. It's close, but it's not profound enough. AI, LLMs, that's not an external commons like a green field would be, and it's not a public resource in the same way that air or water is a public resource. It is a public resource, but it's one that we not only have rights to, but we also have authorship of. It's not, and again, it's not authorship like a consciously created human product, a novel, a painting, a song. It's a third thing. It's kind of a chimera, a blend of all these different things. Now, of course, social media has been mining our output for years, but LLMs, large language models, take that model to a higher and deeper level. People have largely come to understand that when they go on Facebook or X, they're being mined, but AI corporations draw on all our online activities and sometimes our offline ones as well. And through voice digitation, I think they really are aiming to use all human communication as source material. So that makes the AI landscape something fundamentally new, a kind of hybrid form of public resource, collective individual property, and so on. It requires new thinking about economics, technology, and collectivity. And that's another point I want to make right away, is that a chatbot, which is another term for LLM, is a collectivity. It's a communal creation. And so I bring this up for a variety of reasons, one of which is that I am going to make the case that AI is this kind is an inherently socialist technology, therefore it must be governed socialistically. I want to convince you of that, whether or not you consider yourself a socialist. I want you to convince you of that if you're a Keynesian, neo-Keynesian, free market, mixed model, doesn't matter. Whatever your economic philosophy, I believe that you should agree with me that AI, because it's created by everyone, should be owned and governed by everyone. Uh, I should also point out some other reasons why that's the case. It's not just that it's being created by us every time we go online, or possibly every time we get heard by Siri or whatever, Alexa or whatever. They also, because corporations are doing this, they're not only seizing our creation on an ongoing basis, but they're exploiting us directly through labor, through property, and other reasons. Let me give you a story as an example. There was a woman who was born enslaved 2 years before the Civil War ended. Her name was Lavinia Blackburn Johnson. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 gave her the right to buy property, and she bought a home on Carver Road in Virginia. In 1899, she bought that home. Her descendants have lived in that town ever since, a town that became Haymarket, Virginia. They were there for 118 years until the Dominion of Virginia announced that their property was to be forcibly sold to build 100-foot tall towers, each carrying 230,000 volts of power to a new Amazon data center that, yes, you guessed it, would be powering AI. The important thing to remember about AI is that while the Chinese model is far better than the Western models in terms of energy consumption, they are all massive users of fossil fuel power, so much so that I call AI a fossil fuel technology. Now, this was the second time that that the descendants of Lavinia Johnson had their property threatened by state seizure. The first was when the Disney Corporation bought up land near their village in the 1990s to build a Civil War theme park. Well, as with Disney's plan, the power line project was dropped after a massive public outcry. The lines were built underground instead. Last I checked, they were still planning to build a big data center there. But this incident, to me, illustrates our capitalist-driven system's constant willingness to sacrifice the human and intangible in the name of progress. It, of course, illustrates the massive environmental impact of the internet and AI, and it reminds us how the burden of technological progress has always fallen hardest on those who have been historically the most vulnerable. There are other things we should all understand about AI before we get to the discussion of socialism and AI. There are countless unseen workers behind companies like OpenAI, the one behind ChatGPT. OpenAI, for example, used outsourced laborers in Kenya earning less than $2 an hour to review and remove abhorrent content from their databases. That is a job essentially cleaning up toxic waste, and it's a shock to the psyche and to the system. These low-wage workers, it's been well documented, have paid a grave toll in health and well-being after spending long hours every week reviewing material from what Time magazine called rightfully, quote, the darkest recesses of the internet, a material that describes situation in graphic detail, like child sexual abuse, bestiality, murder, suicide, torture, self-harm, and incest, closed quote. So this illustrates a couple things. One, of course, the exploitation of these workers. The other, one of the big lies behind AI, which is that it magically happens in the cloud. It doesn't. It's a work product. It's a product of working people. So other so-called AI products like self-driving cars also require low-paid workers, and that's led to a kind of new high-tech disaster capitalism as billionaire entrepreneurs exploit workers from impoverished countries and even refugee camps to drive these shining, intelligent programs and further exacerbate the inequality and poverty that created the availability of these workers. Now, a researcher named Phil Jones has described it well. He has called with the places where these workers are, quote, the hidden abode of automation, a globally dispersed complex of refugees, slum dwellers, and casualties of occupations compelled through immiseration or else law to power the machine learning of companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Author Paris Marx writes, the robots and chatbots aren't replacing humans, they're just keeping the people out of sight and out of mind, end quote. Now, this is important to note for many reasons, one of which is there's just so much bullshit being generated around AI. This is part of the mythologizing of claiming that it is intelligence. And as an example of the absurdity of this, I would give you a case study in Yuval Harari. Now, you may know Yuval Harari as the person who wrote *Sapiens*, which is a kind of history light, Lite, a kind of picture book for adults on what Yuval Harari thinks human history was. And his new thing is driving all the nonsensical mythology about AI to its height. He's now got a new book coming out. Just the other day, I saw something in Wired magazine where he asks the question, quote, how do we share the planet with this new superintelligence? Now, I'll get back to superintelligence in a minute, but he is convinced, and he talks at length about how superintelligence is the natural product of what AI either will be or is already. Now, Mr. Harari goes on and on at length in this interview with Wired, but in this 5,100 word interview, it's very interesting because there were some words that didn't appear at all in his discussion. Mr. Harari's equality, inequality, poverty, war, occupation, fairness, these were all absent. And instead, there was all this talk about how will we get along with the superintelligence. Now, I'm pretty confident in saying to you, after much research and after listening to far smarter people than myself, that AI is never going to become conscious. It may already behaves in ways we don't fully understand, but it is not super intelligence. It's collective intelligence. It's yours and mine. So what purpose does it serve for Yuval Harari, who speaks at Davos and everywhere else, and Elon Musk and so many other people to go on about the risks of quote unquote super intelligence or AI as an existential threat? One, if it's so devastatingly frightening, then I guess we better turn it over to the experts, right? Like Yuval Harari and Elon Musk. Number two, and you know where that's going to go. Number two, if it's such a risk, that's all we should think about. And we don't think about the harm it's already causing. Well, I got news for you. This is a classic what do they call it? Misdirection, as they say in magic, when they do something out here with their left hand and they slip a card in their pocket with the right hand. So it's very important that we understand what the real risks are. The risks include environmental. They include war. Now, it's very interesting that Yuval Harari doesn't mention war, given that he's based in Israel, and Israel has used artificial intelligence to mass produce targets for bombing and destroying apartment buildings. So here, while we're talking about this magical risk of super intelligence, we're not talking about the fact that this technology is already being used to kill, which is the biggest risk of all. It's a risk to personal rights, but those debates about personal rights have focused almost exclusively on individual rights. I write a screenplay or a book and AI steals it. I paint a picture and AI reproduces it without paying me. That's only part of it. As I'm arguing here, and I wrote a piece for Current Affairs magazine about it, about artificial intelligence and socialism, this hasn't caught up. Our social imagination, to use something I say often, hasn't caught up with our technological capabilities. We're worried about individual rights, and the Screenwriters Guild and others are working on that, Actors Guild for images. It's super important, but it's a fraction of the problem. We also have collective authorship rights on AI, which means it's ours. We own it. That engineers and programmers are the miners of it. But to say that they own artificial intelligence, that's like confusing a steam shovel with coal. The coal belongs to the land, and the people who own the land own the coal. The shovel is something they hire or bring in or do a deal with. So let's make sure that this intangible coal that is our work becomes ours. Of course, another issue is privacy. It's a major concern. The tech industry has lied and done crappy things in the area of privacy for a long time. We're worried about all sorts of surveillance. We now know that AI technology is able to detect emotions, and the way you type, for example, at work could get you fired if it suggests you have a wrong attitude. There's evidence that's already happening. Elon Musk and Doge's mass theft of Social Security and government payroll data is another invasion of privacy. And of course, what they're doing with Social Security is trying to replace all the people who help people get on Social Security and deal with the bureaucracy of it. They want to replace them with AI chatbots. Now, the problem with that, first of all, is that AI is not that good at doing human jobs yet, number one. And number two, it would be so easy to just make an invisible tweak here and there to the algorithm so that it denies people benefits that they're actually entitled to, which I'm sure is part of their thinking as well. Now, global security is also threatened by AI, and it's true, it exists on many levels. Military use of AI will increase the ability of technologically advanced countries to dominate others. But it's interesting because there's a backfire effect too. A Silicon Valley nitwit named Palmer Luckey, who now is moving into, as other Silicon Valley bros are, moving into military technology, says he's working on AI weapons that will, and I quote, give us the ability to swiftly win any war we are forced to enter, end quote. How many times in human history have we been told that a new technology, whether it's gunpowder or, for all I know, the arrow or missiles or computing, will give us that edge that no one else can catch up with, and we'll have peace in our time, mutual assured destruction with nuclear weapons, and so on. Such foolishness that they're buying, and of course they have a great in now under Donald Trump. He, what's his name, Palmer Luckey, also say, quote, it's a powerful part of deterrence that the U.S. has lost over time as our willingness for death has gone down and the cost of our systems has gone up. We can our superior military technology can credibly deter war. Never happened in the past, never will in the future. In fact, one big military technology advance was drones. Now we're seeing how easily drones can be reproduced and given to the Ansar Allah or Houthis in Yemen, who then paralyze Red Sea shipping. These people don't learn. Is AI an existential threat, as Yuval Harari and Elon Musk insist? To the environment, yes, because it's a massive fossil fuel user. To your job, yes, very possibly. To humanity, well, no proof of that so far. Military AI, we already know, is already an existential threat to the people of Gaza. There was an Israeli AI-like program driving the bombing patterns, as I mentioned, called in Hebrew gospel. It was described as quote unquote a mass assassination factory. As a former Israeli intelligence official explained, its real function was to generate rationales, however thin, for bombing civilians and infrastructure. So apparently, at least AI is outpacing humans already in at least one arena, the mass production of homicidal bullshit. And I would have thought we'd had a corner on that. Now, I'll be fair. Some doomsday existential threat AI people, scientists, and so on are clearly sincere. In fact, they worry about things like the paperclip generator scenario. That's a thought experiment where an ultra powerful AI is told to make paperclips and doesn't stop until everything on the planet, including all of humanity, has been turned into paperclips. Now, one thing I've never understood about this scenario is how a superhuman intelligence could become that confused over a simple order for stationary supplies. But I think the people who mention it are sincere. I think other doomers are just trying to manipulate the public, as when Elon Musk says that AI could become, quote, an immortal dictator from which we would never escape, end quote. Well, no, he seems to be working on that himself. So I worry about technology and corporate power as a corporate as an immortal dictator. Now, before we go, I want to get to why socialism is the answer. I just want to this problem. One, it solves the practical concerns. Two, it's an assertion of our collective rights. Three, if there really is an existential threat down the road, I don't want to leave that to people who are weighing that against their own personal wealth and profit. But also, I want to emphasize the morality angle. Because it is our collective work, we should own it. That should be a given. I would also say that its role in each workplace, it should be determined by workers democratically, not by the bosses who own it or the AI company they hire. What will happen to education? Well, let's hope that education maybe is used more in the way John Dewey envisioned, to make us better citizens rather than as a government-funded training program to serve the overlords. Now, before I go, there's so much more we could say. I'll probably have to do another one on socialism, but what would it look like to say democratically run a socialist AI system? Well, could be a process of national governments taking it over, or international consortia. Data centers could become public utilities. Computer scientists, they should be well compensated. They're smart people and they should be highly respected professionals, but they would work for the public, mining the public's resource. As for those of us who create this collective intellectual property, we could be compensated in several ways. The revenues could be used to enhance an education, as I just described, build public media, or people might receive small stipends for contributing to the greater system. But unless and until there is some form of compensation for everyone online, the system will always be exploitative. This is important too, because we're being hypnotized into a form of addiction that feeds the AI. People should be allowed to see, understand, and make decisions about the algorithms that are used to filter information and that are used to keep us addicted to technology. Why should we be addicted for these reasons? It doesn't make any sense. We must have freedom of choice regarding the stickiness of the technology. That's the addiction too. And all of these questions need to be, as I say, discussed in an open forum. Otherwise, they're moot. But I want to just end with this. The public deserves to own its creation. Instead, we've been made servants of it. That doesn't have to be permanent. We don't have to accept their definitions as our own. And I hope that rethinking the way we look at AI programs will be the first step toward rethinking the way we look at a lot of our economic and political power relationships. But either way, the fight for this technology is a fight for the future. Thanks for listening.